we started this research with the deep frustration that despite 30 years of research in management and millions of books and articles written on how to change and about change management, the fact is that most executives still underperform or fail in strategic change process. And the numbers around the world is about 70%. And if in medical surgery that you have a 70% rate of failure, most people would hesitate undergoing the surgery, right? But that's what the problems that we're facing today in management. So we are trying to discover the deep causes of what might cause that. And we discovered that one factor that may have explained our failures in change management is that we do not take into account the time dimensions enough. And the time dimensions is something much more complicated than just when to do a change and how fast and how slow to do a change and for how long to do a change. But usually when managers do the change planning, that's what they focus on in their project management issues. In our research, we discovered that that is a good start, but it's far from comprehensive, because if we don't take into account all the dimensions of change, the change performance will fail for sure. So let me give you a few examples. The first conception of time is about clock speed. So what we discuss about is about clock speed: how fast, how slow, when, how long. That's about just the clock, the time. But it's not enough. When the fact that people with the when of change, well, the social time is also important. When you start a change process, the fact that you start the change process on Christmas Eve, for example, is quite different in terms of people's feelings than you start a change process on a Monday morning when people are back to work and everything is normal. It also affects, and another conception of time that's beyond clock speed is what we call subjective time. It's how people interpret a change process, how people make sense of a change event, change process. It has nothing to do with how long or how fast it takes. It's coming from the sense making of the people who discuss, and that's based on history, culture, social context, and that also have a big impact on how fast and how slow the change could occur. So that's about conceptions of time. But there are also the different temporal markers, which many people and managers do not pay attention to, is about various temporal markers such as pacing of change, how fast, the frequency of change, how often you have to do the change process, the sequencing of change, what kind of change actions should be first, second, third, okay? The rhythm of change. The rhythm of change is that how many change events should we plan into a given change episode, and what is the temporal distance between each of those change action, should they be very close to each other or should they be far? Why are these temporal markers important to change process? Because research shows that people need to learn during the change process. If you go too fast, people has no time to learn. If it's too slow, people don't learn either because there's too much temporal distance and people have moved on to certain things. There's a fact that's called change fatigue. So if in history you have experienced too much change, then you are already you're tired of too many change processes have been going on. There's also the different temporal markers that people have to take into account, which most people have not really focused on, such as the temporal focus. Research has shown that different CEOs and managers have marked differences in how they focus on time. Some proportionally focus more on the past, some focus more on the present, and some focus more on the future. And research shows that people who focus more on the future tends to do more innovation, but at the same time, if they don't focus on the present, they tend to fail it because they focus so much on the future that they miss the here and now, and they fail it. So having on the team the balance of people with different temporal focus also the important aspects. There's other aspects such as temporal depth. How long do you go back to the past and how long you go in the future? And that's back to the so-called in finance long time horizon. Are you talking about a 2 years time frame? Are you doing innovation in 2 to 3 years? or you're talking about innovation in terms of 20 years. And of course, those temporal distance and temporal depth also have a big impact on how CEOs and managers allocate resources in order to do various change activities. So all of these aspects need to be considered when you plan a change process. But the fact is that today we recognize that scholars and managers alike do not have such a large vocabulary about various temporal dimensions. And so what we're advocating is that you have to increase the temporal intelligence of people as much as we talk about increasing emotional intelligence. And one factor intelligence is to increase the number of variables and levers that you can use. We should also increase the number of levers related to time, such as timing, pacing, sequencing, rhythm, temporal depth, entrainment. All these factors should be taken into account in the management of change and to the planning of change, much more than the usual project management that looks at only how fast, how slow, and for how long.